the horror genre.
For promotional material, most of them must have a title, tagline, synopsis, actors, actresses, photo from the film, something to give them a sense of which genre it is, film quote, director and cast. A catchy slogan is also expected to make the audience remember the film and to make it different than others that already exist. Any film that is being promoted needs to have the release date so it is clear to the audience when the film will be released. If, for example, there was a game that was being promoted for the film, it would have the same picture that was on the film poster, trailer, or any other type of merchandise that was being promoted for the film. They are expected to have the same theme on all types of promotional material so that it is consistent and the target audience will recognise the promoted film on any of the advertisements.
Camera work. Horror uses certain camera work and has become a stylistic convention. Shots are used to add tension like point of view shots, close-ups and handheld shots. Lighting. Low-key lighting allows for effective contrast of bright light and deep darkness forms moods. This means the audience can't tell exactly what's happening and creates suspense and anxiety. Music and sounds. These help to create suspense. When the audience hear specific sounds, they can tell what will happen. Adds to the scary effect, and without the music and noise, it wouldn't be the same. Ratings for horror films are usually high rated. This would be because of their explicit violence within the film. The most appropriate age for the horror film would be 18. This would be the most appropriate age for the target audience. If the film is not on TV, it would be shown after Watershed, so the younger audience would not be able to. We have tried to terrify each other with tales that trigger the less logical parts of our imaginations for as long as we've told. Generation gets the horror films it deserves, and one of the more fascinating aspects of the study of the genre is the changing nature of the monsters who present a threat in the early 1940s. A world living under the shadow of Hitler's predatory tendencies identified a part man, part wolf as their bogeyman, whose nature caused him to tear apart those who crossed his path. Horror movies were reborn in the 1930s. The advent of sound, as well as changing the whole nature of cinema forever, had a huge impact on the horror game. The dreamlike imagery of the 1920s, the films people by a ghostly figure floating silently through the terror of mortals, their grotesque death masks a visual representation of the horror were replaced by monsters that grunted and groaned and howled. Horror was still essentially looking backwards, drawing upon the literary classics of the 19th century for their source material. Horror films have progressed into real-life situations and more realistic films. Top 12 Masters of Horror. Neil Marshall, most famous for The Descent and Dog Soldiers. The Pang Brothers, most famous for The Eye. Eli Roth, most famous for Jellyfish in the Sky. James Wan, most famous for the horror films. Rob Zombie, most famous for 1,000 Corpses and The Devil Rejects. David Cronenberg, A History of Violence.
Clive Barker, the most memorable horror films of the past 20 years, including the Hellraiser films, the Candyman series, Tobe Hooper, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Sam Raimi, the most famous for The Evil Dead.
George A. Romero, most famous for Night of the Living Dead. John Carpenter, most famous for Halloween. Wes Craven, most famous for The Hills Have Eyes, The Last House on the Left, and Nightmare on Elm Street.